Hello, guys. For screwing me over, my parents lately got a horrible sentence. They utterly earned every bit of it. I told them. I sincerely apologized for them. I thought I had earned it and sort of boasted about it. A few of my pals have informed me, though, that was absolutely pointless. Male, 17, and in a few weeks I'm supposed to be attending college. I intended to keep away from my parents as much as possible. Hence, I had applied to numerous business colleges outside our state. I also didn't suppose they would be missing me either. I was correct about that. However, recently I only found out that they withdrew my application from my chosen college by going behind my back. It was all down to my brother, an insecure, jealous child who finds it unacceptable to see me succeeding or pleased. For the past few years, he has been failing out of school. No matter how hard he tries, he always falls short at some aspect. His issue is clearly his appearance to others and how the so-called cool kids view him, not his academics. My parents appear not to see that for some reason. Part of the issue is that I have practically never seen my brother studying while at home. Rather than trying to address it, my parents have seen several experts over the past few months to see whether he has any learning problems impeding his performance. This followed a conversation between his high school counselor and our parents, which he informed them he has been performing quite poorly at school, and they should act. He needs to raise his grades or else he will not get admitted into any half-decent university and wind up in community college 2 years away from graduation. That's what got my parents engaged, the knowledge of their beloved kid having to go community college. Personally, I gave that matter very little thought. It's hardly my business. My parents could create any justification they desired for the shortcomings of their favorite son. My future in ensuring I entered a reputable business school piqued more of my curiosity since it would help me succeed and keep distance from my family. I also applied to Stanford to ensure of that. Everyone knows that Stanford is a pretty big deal, and I had been hoping that I would get accepted because my grades are not that bad. A couple of my friends had told me that they expected me to get accepted, so I went for it. Even if I didn't get accepted, I would be fine with it because at least I had tried to get in. But I don't think my parents were fine with it because apparently, a few days after I sent in my application, they sent an email pretending to be me and withdrew my application without my knowledge. So I wouldn't even stand a chance. Recently, I started hearing back from all the colleges that I had applied to, and I've been accepted into most of them. This is good news for me since when the time comes, I'll have many options to choose from. But I was just a little put off by the fact that I hadn't received any response from Stanford at all. Usually, even if it's to reject somebody, at least they do send something. Strangely enough, I hadn't received any word, so I was beginning to get very iffy about it. I couldn't stay patient for much longer since my friends had started asking me about Stanford, and I couldn't exactly tell them that I hadn't heard back from them at all. When I tried checking, I couldn't find my application status on their admissions portal, and that's when I started thinking that this was getting weird. I even checked my email, including the spam section, and there was nothing. In the end, without any other options left, I decided to call the admissions office to check out what was going on because I thought there must have been some glitch. Later on, they called me back and told me that I had withdrawn my application by email, and that's why they hadn't bothered to reach out to me. I refused to believe it at first because I thought that was impossible. I told them there must have been some confusion because I specifically remember having applied. They told me they had received an email to withdraw my application days after I had applied, and that's why they had canceled it. They couldn't speak to me for long because, obviously, they had work to get to. So I had to spend the entire day in shock. I kept trying to find something to explain what just happened, but there was nothing. In the end, I had to accept the unpleasant reality that somebody else had sabotaged me. At first, my mind only went to my brother because I couldn't imagine anybody else who would be so jealous of me that they would try to do something like this. But his behavior didn't seem to be any different around me. He was still cocky and arrogant and really annoying, but I knew that if he had done something like this, he would be trying to rub it in my face, and he wasn't doing that, so I had my doubts about whether he was actually the culprit. A couple of days after I learned what had happened, I decided to confront him because I was going crazy not knowing the truth. When I went into his room to ask him about it, he just looked really confused, and I thought that was genuine. But I don't trust him at all, so I decided to try and grill him. He got annoyed and started yelling at me, telling me that he didn't even know how to access my email, and if he had known, he would have probably withdrawn from every college that I had applied to. That way, I wouldn't have any options either, and I wouldn't be prancing around the house constantly celebrating all the acceptance emails. That kind of rubbed me the wrong way, especially since I was already really upset with whatever had happened. So I started yelling at him, and soon enough, we were fighting. I meant a physical fight, so as soon as our parents heard yelling, they came to his room to break us apart. But I don't know what had gotten into me. I started acting completely psychotic. Maybe it was the fact that somebody had sabotaged me on purpose, because things like this don't just happen on their own. I was feeling very frustrated, and I guess I was trying to take it out on him. My parents were trying really hard to stop me from trying to beat him up, but I was being totally vicious. Eventually, my dad had to hold me back. My mom told me that it was they who had withdrawn my application and not my brother. That was when I completely froze and stopped trying to beat my brother up because it was totally unexpected. I felt betrayed, hurt, and blindsided all at once. Nobody in the room even knew what to do for a couple of seconds. All of us just stood there silently because I was trying to think of something to say to them and process my feelings, but there was nothing that I wanted to say. I was literally in shock. When I did not say anything, my mom started trying to explain what had happened. She had already started crying and told me that she and my dad had always had access to my email because before I got my personal laptop, I used to do everything on my dad's laptop. When I got my own, I guess I should have logged out from everyone else, but I forgot because at the time it did not seem important. When I started to apply to colleges, it was around the time that my brother's high school counselor had told my parents that he needed to do something about his grades or he wouldn't have any choice but to go to community college. Eventually, it was quite bad because she had also compared him to me since we went to the same high school and told our parents that I wanted to go to business school. I had several options, but when the time came, my brother wouldn't be able to have the same options. She had advised my parents to have my brother speak to me so he would be able to get on the same track academically and do better, and even asked them to have me tutor my brother. Obviously, it was well-intentioned on her part, and she was just trying to look out for my brother since she had no idea that he and I had such a terrible equation. But my parents took it the other way and started thinking about how negatively it must impact my brother to know that I was doing so much better than him. They started to think that maybe it was the pressure of having to outperform me, or at least be equal to me, that was getting to him. So they had been quite worried about him, and my dad had suggested the idea of going through my email and checking out what colleges I was applying to since I had never spoken to them about it. They wanted to make sure that these colleges were all on a normal and achievable level and wouldn't make my brother feel even more inferior to me. Most of them were, but then they noticed that I had also applied to Stanford. They immediately realized that if I got accepted, it would probably ruin my brother's mental health. Since then, he would always end up getting compared to me, his high-achieving older brother who went to Stanford and got a degree in business. They thought about it for a couple of days, and then my mom suggested that maybe they could withdraw without me even knowing since they had access to my email. So they knew my application ID and stuff. It would be quite sly and unethical, but she thought that at least that would help the situation. At least then my brother wouldn't have to deal with the shame of doing badly in comparison to me. So they threw around that idea for a couple more days, and eventually my parents decided that this would be the best thing to do for our family and withdrew my application. Since it was still in the application stage, they only followed up electronically by sending a confirmation email to make sure that I actually wanted to withdraw. My parents did it all on my behalf. They made sure not to leave a paper trail by deleting all of those emails. They got lucky that I didn't check the application portal since I had assumed that any further communication would be conducted by email. That's how it's usually done. Also, I was busy with my finals and stuff. I had also applied to a bunch of other colleges. I wasn't overly confident enough to just assume that I would get into Stanford so easily. I had been applying to other colleges as well, and those applications also took time. So I had been pretty overwhelmed for the past couple of months. Unfortunately, I hadn't checked the portal when I should have because then I might have been able to find out that I had been sabotaged by my own parents. Now it was too late for me to do anything apart from just think about how heartless these people were. After my mom told me everything, she and my dad tried to come to my side to comfort me. Even my brother looked shocked. They tried to talk to me and tell me that they were really sorry about everything. But at the time, they had just been too preoccupied with my brother and hadn't thought about the consequences of what they were doing. Even now that I knew everything, they were sorry about it, but they still believed that my getting into Stanford would have been terrible for my brother's mental health. But I wasn't interested in their apologies. I had heard enough. So I shook them off and went back into my room. Then I locked myself in and started packing because I couldn't spend one more minute in that house with them. They kept trying to get me to come out of my room, but I was not going to do any of that. Once I was done packing all the stuff I could carry, I called myself a cab and ignored my parents while they tried to talk to me. As I made my way outside the house and got into the cab, I headed over to my grandparents' place. My dad's parents live closer, while my maternal grandparents live slightly far away. So I decided to go to my paternal grandparents' house. As soon as I was there, I told them everything, and I told them that I didn't want to go back home. They had always known that things were not great at home for me since my parents always seemed to prefer my brother over me. But this was extreme, and my grandpa lost it when I told him what had happened. My grandma tried to comfort me because whenever I was at their place, I finally allowed myself to cry. While I was crying, my grandpa was yelling at my parents in the other room. I could tell that even on the phone, they were trying to defend their decision, but my grandpa was not having any of it. He really tore into them. A couple of minutes after that, I heard him speaking to somebody else on the phone. This time he was speaking much more civilly and normally, explaining the situation. When he finally came back to the living room, he also joined my grandma and sat by my side to comfort me. But then I had gotten a hold of myself and wasn't crying anymore. My grandpa told me that my other grandparents would be arriving the next day, and then all of them would decide what was going to happen. He also reassured me and told me that I didn't need to worry because he was going to sort out everything for me. I wasn't sure what that was supposed to mean, but I was too tired to question anything, so I let it go. The next day, my other grandparents also arrived, and we were all in the same place. Once they were there, they consulted me and told me that they were going to try their best to fix the situation for me. Obviously, it was going to be impossible for them to get me into Stanford now, but they told me that whatever expenses I had, my college tuition and other living expenses. They would cover all of it. That was a huge deal because college is pretty expensive. My parents had told me right in the beginning that I would either have to work through college or get a student loan. I had decided that I was going to take out a loan with a little help from my parents and maybe work in my free time so I would be able to pay off eventually. It had been made very clear to both me and my brother that my parents were not going to pay for us to go to college. I guess that was the only fair thing they had done in their entire lives because no matter how much they loved my brother, they weren't going to pay for him either. But judging by his grades, I don't think they have to worry about that since he might not even end up in college anyway. My grandparents told me that they would cover everything, and I was thrilled. But there was more to come. Apparently, they had discussed all of this some more while I had been sleeping the previous night. Their decision was that what my parents had done was so terrible and extreme that they no longer wanted to be in contact with them. My grandparents were thus going to tell their respective solicitors that I was the only heir to their inheritance. That actually hadn't occurred, hence it blew my mind. Though I tried, I had no idea what to say or how to thank them. They informed me I didn't have to since, following what I had gone through in my whole life, they were the ones I should be forgiving to. They could produce better children who would be decent parents to me. Though I was in a better mood, my grandparents seemed slightly agitated. I could tell they were really let down by my parents, most likely more than by myself. Still, I thanked them as much as I could as this was rather significant for me. Acting all cheerful around them seems to help them feel better as well. About 3 days ago, all of this transpired. Since then, I have been living with my grandparents. Although my parents had tried to discourage me from going, they did not follow up with me once I departed. My other grandparents are also here, and we are temporarily sharing quarters. By the end of this week, though, my mother's parents will be departing. They came here just to check on me. Now that they know I'm good, they will be heading back home. My parents' family got in touch last evening, but it was not to apologize. It was to start blaming me for being a snitch since, supposedly, my grandparents had all reached out to them collectively a few hours before they contacted me. They wanted nothing to do with my parents anymore and expressed great disappointment in the way they had acted. They had also already contacted with their attorney and informed my parents they would be taken off their particular wills. They were therefore about to begin the procedure really soon, and as I deserved it far more than they would have, I was going to be inheriting alone. Up until a few days ago, when I first discovered it, my parents were acting rather contrite about what they had done. But last evening, the real colors began to show. They started being vicious and really mean and said that I needed to speak to my grandparents and fix what I had done. There was no way that they were going to allow me to walk away with all the inheritance. That was when I started gloating. I told them that they totally deserved this and that they had brought this onto themselves. So I was really glad that my grandparents had made this decision to cut them out of not only their life, but also their inheritance. I told them that my grandparents were also going to be paying for me to go to college. They could continue to baby my brother, but it was very unlikely that he would end up in any good places. So their retirement funds would remain untouched since they wouldn't have to worry about him going away to college. I then said that they didn't need to be upset because if they needed help in their old age, I would be more than willing to put them in touch with charities willing to help out the destitute. I was sure that all their own money was going to go into supporting my brother for the rest of his life. It's not like they have an inheritance to count on anymore, so they had better start saving up or wait for me to put them in touch with charity organizations. I guess that was the last straw for them because after that, they started yelling at me incoherently. I couldn't even figure out what they were saying since they were mostly just cussing at me. So I hung up and blocked them, and it was very satisfying for me. But then I made the mistake of telling a few of my friends about it. I thought that they would be on my side because they knew everything, but instead, they told me that there was no reason for me to say all of that. They said I could have just accepted my win and moved on with dignity. I ended up getting into an argument with them, and now I feel kind of bad about it. I don't think my grandparents know about any of this yet because they haven't said anything. But I'm scared to bring it up with them because I don't want to make it seem like I was being cocky. I'm confused about what to do or feel right now. So, AITA for gloating in front of my parents now that I know that all their inheritance is going to be mine. Edit. I do not have a good relationship with my brother. Never have, never will. I know for a fact that it was my parents who were responsible for always being biased towards him and treating him differently. But he is no less of a brat himself. He's a complete one-ape and a bit of a bully at school, which is pretty embarrassing for me. He has never been nice to me ever since we were kids, and that's why I have bad blood with him as well as my parents. Now getting into why my grandparents had never bothered to rescue me from my parents and get me to live with them instead. That's because there was nothing to rescue me from. They couldn't legally do anything about how my parents were treating me because it's not like they were neglecting me or isolating me. At times, they were actually even nice to me, but we just had a very complicated, strained relationship. In cases like mine, kids just have to make peace with the situation because there's not much else that can be done. So, for everyone who had been saying that my grandparents should have fought for my custody when I was younger and raised me themselves, I don't think that would have been possible. No court would entertain something like this, and I don't think my parents would have wanted to give up my custody either because it would have been a bad look for them. If they didn't want to give it up, there was no way that my grandparents could have done anything. I myself did not think about moving out until recently when things got too bad to still continue living with my parents. I had just accepted my fate and was waiting for college to start so that I could move away. I hope this explains everything regarding why I have been so against my brother this entire time and why I didn't move out until recently. Most people had a lot of questions about this. Update 1. Hi. So, after giving it a lot of thought and going through the comments, I have decided I don't owe my friends any explanation. Most of them have come from really good homes, but they have been treated well, so they have no idea what I've been through in my life. If I want to gloat about something, I'm going to do it. I have earned this for myself by putting up with my parents all my life, and I don't care what they think about it. Besides, they're forgetting that it was not even as if I had called my parents up. They were the ones who had done it. I just responded to them in the same tone that they were talking to me. It's not wrong, and I refuse to be sorry about any of that. Today, I even spoke to my grandparents about it, and they told me that I should have just ignored that phone call and blocked them. But they didn't seem to mind the fact that I had been so rude with my parents. After all, they had earned this thanks to their behavior. It has been 3 days since the phone call, and I haven't yet received any other messages from them. So I'm hoping that they don't reach out anymore. My maternal grandparents left to go home today, and I was kind of sad to see them go because I don't really get to see them as often. But they told me that they would be back soon, and all 4 of them would go with me to drop me off at college when I finally start. So that's nice, and I can't wait. Update 2. Hi. So 2 days ago, I posted my last update, and I guess I spoke too soon about my parents leaving me alone. Today, they showed up at my house, probably because they were not ready to give up on the inheritance so easily. But they are so stupid that they don't even realize that they can't storm in and demand things like that, especially after what they've done. They should have been apologetic and acted sorry about what they had done, even if they didn't really mean it. But instead, they had a terrible attitude and started fighting with my grandparents as soon as they showed up at the door. When they saw me in the back, telling my grandparents to just shut the door and let this go, my mom addressed me directly by calling me a cuss word. Then she told me that I was a selfish brat for snitching on them, especially over something like this. She went on to say that it wasn't even as though I was good enough to actually qualify for Stanford, so I needed to stop acting like the victim. I flared up when she said that because it was still a sore spot for me. I hadn't wanted to interact with them, but I ended up screaming at her. I told her that I might have gotten in if she and my father had actually allowed me that chance. But thanks to their insecurities, I didn't even get that chance. When my grandparents realized that I was getting agitated, they shut the door and told my parents to leave or else they would call the cops. But my parents still stood outside the door and continued to yell about how unfair all of this was. My dad especially kept trying to talk to his parents and even tried to throw me under the bus, saying that they knew for a fact that if I ever got to Stanford, I would never shut up about it. That would have affected my brother's mental health negatively, so they were only trying to look out for their family and keep everything balanced, as if that was a valid reason to have done what they did. After a while, my grandpa got really mad and turned on the sprinklers. Only then did my parents finally go away. My grandpa has reassured me that after this, if my parents tried to show up again, he would definitely just call the cops and leave them to deal with it. So I don't need to worry about it anymore. And I feel kind of better because at least I got it out of my system, even though I could have just avoided any interaction with them. But it's done now, so fine. Update 3. Hi everyone. So it's been a couple of months since I last had any interaction with my parents. My grandfather told me they had tried to turn up once more to quarrel with my grandparents, but that time he had actually contacted the police and had them taken off. Instead of home at the time, I was out with several friends, not the ones who had attacked me. I'm good with it. I'm not in touch with them anymore. Cutting out the people you don't want to be in contact with and the ones who don't care about your well-being helps you see that life gets far better and simpler. Right now, I only know a few pals and, naturally, my grandparents. Knowing that we have had a falling out, most of the extended family is not talking to my parents anymore. Most people know they don't want to be on whichever side my parents are on, even if most of them hardly know what actually happened. 3 weeks ago, I started college, and it's fantastic. I have several new acquaintances, and the classes are fascinating. Though I understand it will be a lot of work, I am ready to put in that much effort to improve my future. Particularly so that, given their amazing guardianship of me, I can finally do something for my grandparents. Right now, things are fantastic. Even though I'm not in Stanford, I'm in a quite decent university. That works as I am aware I will maximize